Hi, everyone. We're just going to give it another minute to let you all get in the room, and we'll start at noon. All right, we are at noon. We appreciate you joining us. My name is Carrie Potter, and I am an educational support coach with Family Matters. Family Matters is one of two parent centers in the state of Illinois. There's at least one in every state. As I said, Illinois has two, so we cover 94 counties within Illinois, and then FRCD, or the Family Resource Center on Disabilities, covers the remaining 8 counties of the state. If you need information, regarding special education services, things like that, feel free to contact our office. I will say Family Matters does not provide any form of legal services, so any information received from us should not be perceived as such, any legal advice, anything like that. We appreciate you taking time to join us today for this presentation on AT considerations. And please take time to take a survey. You should get one after the presentation ends. That greatly helps us, and we, appreciate your honest feedback. And so without further ado, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. We really enjoy doing webinars and professional learning events for families, and specifically Family Matters, to support all their good work. My name is Jen Skalitsky, and I am an assistive technology facilitator by trade. I work for Infinitec, which provides assistive technology services to member school districts. And we also have a grant through the Illinois State Board of Education. And the goal of that grant is to provide free assistive technology training across the state of Illinois, and also on universal design for learning. So that's what brings me here today. And because this is an ISB sponsored event and paid for by that, I will know the number of attendees, but if you could also type in the county that you live, that would be so helpful. So if you can go ahead and type in the chat your county, that would be most helpful. As we like to track all the regions of Illinois, as we like to go across Illinois, whether it's face-to-face or virtually. So as you type in your counties, I'm going to go ahead and begin. Also, Carrie was kind enough to throw in the chat the handouts, and that is the handouts for today. They are electronic, and I highly encourage you to save that link, because what I have done is put a lot of different hyperlinks embedded inside the presentation. I really like when people are able to access the resources at a later time. I find that really helpful. So I know everyone's kind of thrown their counties in there, and thank you so much for doing that. But then also maybe scroll a little bit to open up those handouts, and maybe Carrie, you can throw in another handout link, or I can too as well.
I will say the chat was disabled at first, so I did enable that. So if you did try to type in your county and you could not, it should work now.
Okay, perfect. Oh, and I just kind of try to help you out there, and I lost my slides. So let me throw those back up while you type in the chat. Oh, and I see the little icons going up. So that's wonderful that you all are accessing that. So I'll leave this up for another couple seconds, and hopefully whether you've written it down or you've gathered it in the chat. And I encourage you to type in your questions and your comments in the chat, and I will be periodically stopping and checking for those. I know it's kind of hard during a webinar, but I do want to encourage, any questions that you have or comments that you have through the presentation. All right, I want to start out by talking about assistive technology, the law, and what it says in the Illinois with Disabilities Education Act. And assistive technology was most recently cited in 2004, even though it began in the late 90s. So we're really happy that it's embedded in the law. And I want to lay that foundation for you. So the legal definition of assistive technology device is an assistive technology device means any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether it's acquired commercially off the shelf, modified, or customized that's used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of a child with a disability. Now, those are lots of words. So what I want to do is break it down and highlight each section. So the first one being any item. It can truly be any item. Sometimes a myth of assistive technology is that it's that really expensive piece of equipment that costs a lots and tons of money. And that's actually not true. It can be any item. It can be simply a keyboard, a standard keyboard that someone needs because they may have dysgraphia, they may have trouble handwriting, so typing is an alternative. Also a pen, something like a pen grip. I have a picture of a tennis ball with a hole cut in the middle. OTs are famous for occupational therapists are famous for adapting things. So it can truly be any item. Also, the definition tells us it's a product system. So what that definition means by a product system is that, for example, this is a picture of a student on an iPad that has headphones on and is listening to his textbook online. So it's a number of things working together. So it's not just the iPad itself, it's also the app that allows that textbook to be presented out loud so the student can comprehend. It's also the headphones. So it's all of those things working together. It's not just the iPad, it's the specialized app to read out loud, and then the headphones as well. Because if you didn't have all those pieces together, it would not be successful. Of course, he may be successful at home in a quiet environment, but you'll need those headphones in school. Also, part of the definition states it's acquired commercially off the shelf, modified, or customized. And we are so lucky in the past 10, 15 years in the advent of everyday technology that really has some amazing universal features, such as text-to-speech, or we have iPads that can have communication apps installed. And that has really helped assistive technology be more accessible to all students and also more cost-effective. But we have to remember, even though it's something that's commercially available, we also have to make sure that we modify and customize it and personalize it to the student's needs. I can't tell you how many times I've been called in and a student refuses to use text to speech. When I get down to the nitty gritty, finding about it, I've realized the student doesn't like the voice one, or the student thinks that it's going too fast or going too slow. So with that being said, sometimes those little tweaks are so important and so imperative. The point being that we customize, number one. Two, we get the student involved in the process. And I think that's also very imperative as well. And then finally, the end part of that definition is to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of a child with a disability. And that's the ultimate goal, right? Is that goal for someone to communicate? Is that goal for someone to read, to write, and so forth? So that's the ultimate goal of that assistive technology. Now, the second part of the legal definition is assistive technology service. And we really need to take this into account. I think in the field of assistive technology, this is often forgotten. We often think about this shiny tool, the really cool tool that the student uses, but what's equally important is the assistive technology service, which is the implementation of it. And that includes an evaluation. There may be an evaluation, there may be an assessment. Also, figuring out how to provide that AT device. Is it going to be leased? Is it going to be rented? Is it going to be owned, purchased? And then also figuring out the selection. I mentioned how we have to customize it. Design, fit, adapt, apply, maintain, repair, or replace. Those are lots of words there. So we know the technology will break. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So we have to have a backup plan, and we also have to customize for our student. And also for the use of coordination of and usage with other AT, with other therapies. And that comes into play when, for example, a student uses a communication device. Communication does not just happen in the speech room, it happens throughout the day. Also, if you think of a student perhaps that may use a keyboard for writing, writing happens throughout the day, not just in the OT room. So working with teachers, working with other therapists, and making sure that everyone can implement that tool and know how it works to help support that student. And that's where training comes involved. We have to train the student, we have to train the staff, And also parents. In some cases, assistive technology may go home. And if that goes home, then students may need to know how, parents may need to know how to do that as well to support their kids. So that's the legal definition of assistive technology. Before I kind of get into the legal parameters of what we have to do for IEPs, are there any questions so far just on that definition? And I'm noticing, I can open up the chat too, Carrie. So I am looking and I don't see any questions, but again, I encourage you to type in those questions as you think of them. If you're like me, sometimes you forget the questions that you may have. So type them as you think of them and I will be periodically breaking. All right, I'm not seeing any questions on the AT definition. So now the other part of this is that in Illinois, we have legislation from the state. And as parents, you may have already seen this, that there's a paragraph added to the notification of conference that the IEP team will discuss whether your child requires assistive technology, AT, to receive a free and appropriate public education. So it's just a heads up. This is something that's going to be happening. And then they give an additional resource. And the other part of AT consideration that changed a few years back is that there was always that checkbox in the consideration of special factors of the yes and the no. And it states is assistive technology devices and services, big part there, services needed for your student, for your child. And if the answer is yes, please specify the AT. If no, specify why AT is not needed. So those are changes that happened a few years ago that sparks the consideration of assistive technology in the IEP meeting. And so when we are considering assistive technology devices and services, what that legal definition tells us is that we have to start out by considering assistive technology. We're going to go way deeper into consideration. But then the legal definition also tells us that we have to provide it. We have to work on that implementation. So that's really where those services come into play. And the monitoring of the student performance, which is also where the services come into play, that legal definition. If you notice, it's not a linear cycle there. It is secular, and this is from our Illinois Assistive Technology Manual. So I'm going to throw this question out to you folks. Why do you think that this isn't a linear process? Why do you think that this is a secular? Why, based on that definition, do we always have to consider, provide, implement, and monitor students' performance? Now, I'm saying this from a school lens. Why do schools always have to do this? And I'll be quiet for a moment and give you a second to think. Good answers. Students' needs are always changing. They're not static, right? Kids change and grow, right? The kids' abilities change. The curriculum changes every year. And yes, technology is always changing. It's so interesting. By the time we get off this call here, 3 new things have probably come out. So all those things, the needs of the students are always changing. The curriculum is always changing. The technology is always changing. And legally, we have to do it. We have to consider it every year. So there's lots of reasons why this is a secular process and not a linear one. So let's look at AT consideration. I talked about the legal definitions. I talked about how it has to be considered in the schools, but what does that checkbox really mean? And as in the title, it is more than just a checkbox. So AT consideration is a consideration of AT is purposeful, it's collaborative, it's not one person decision-making process. So how it works is the IEB team reviews existing information, and sometimes they may need to gather more information before deciding if assistive technology is needed for that child to receive a free and appropriate public education, FAPE. Then once that happens, the decision is then documented in the IEP. So that's the simplified version, and that is from the Illinois AT manual, and that is the definition that's given. So I want to go deeper. Who is responsible for AT consideration? The responsibility for AT consideration falls upon the entire IEP team and is not regulated to an individual or outside evaluator. I'm going to say that again. Everyone on the team plays an important role on AT consideration. Some school districts have an AT facilitator or AT specialist, and they may be contributors, but truly it's the whole entire team that plays a role. And also the parent is part of that IEP team. So you say, oh, my role, I'm a parent, I have a role. So how am I the role in AT consideration? So this is from Gail Bowser, who is one of the godmothers of assistive technology in the United States. She's been practicing for, gosh, 30 to 40 years and is really not recognized as one of the leaders in the field and experts and pioneers. And we were referencing her a lot throughout this presentation. And she tells us that AT assessment, so when we're considering AT, is not a formal test with correct answers. AT assessment is a process in which you make your child's IEP team collect all sorts of information about the barriers they're facing and data about the performance compares to other kids. And you play an important role as part of that on the IEP. So how do you request AT for your child? So you're probably on this call because you're wondering. Well, we already know because I stated part of the legal aspects was that it's on the IEP. You have to consider it for every child. So if you have concerns about your child, talk to your child's teachers and team. Those are the first people that I would talk to if you are wondering if AT is appropriate for your child. And you don't have to wait to the IEP meeting. AT consideration should be year round. If a student is struggling with reading in September, then you shouldn't wait till the spring to discuss assistive technology at the the IEP meeting. If, perhaps you want to introduce text to speech so that the child can comprehend what they're reading and then also still work on, decoding and so forth and their fluency. But you'd never want to, wait to talk about AT just one time a year if you have a child that's struggling. It should be year round. And that's one of the myths that I think is so important to realize, that it shouldn't be something that's wait. So there may be some things that are available to try before an IEP meeting. And after the team tries some things, you may still need more information and you may then have to ask about an evaluation or assessment. You do not, well, I should say each district does it differently. Most districts do not perform official AT evaluations. Most districts do AT assessments, and we're going to dive deeper into the difference between an evaluation and assessment because many of our teachers are very skilled in knowing what tools are out there, and like any good teaching practice, they're able to use those tools to assess whether a student benefits from the use of AT, and you may not need a formal evaluation. And also really important, and we're going to talk even more in depth about asking very specific questions about assistive technology. Do you hope your daughter will be able to communicate her needs? That's very specific. Does your son need to have text read out loud to understand it? Does your son need to be write more legibly? So you can see how these are very specific questions that go after a very specific task. That's also really helpful. Here are some other consideration referral questions. When I begin to think that my child may need assistive technology, I should ask myself, what are the specific problems my child encounters in school, such as reading assigned text, writing clearly and legibly, seeing written words, speaking clearly, communicating needs and interests? And what evidence do I have of these difficulties? You may see some of this when you're doing homework with them at home, that you may notice that they do way better when you read the text out loud to them. They can comprehend that text. Or you can see that they come up with better ideas when you scribe for them and then you take that motor component out of writing and they can generate their ideas. So those are just examples of what evidence you have that you may see these difficulties. And then what are we doing at home to try to help? You may say, I'm reading to them, as I just said, or I'm writing for them. And those are good strategies, but as parents and as educators, you always want them to be independent. And assistive technology is going to allow that independence. And here are some questions that you can ask your service providers at your school. Could my child perform better if the way he or she does the tasks was changed? So it's a very generic question of, based on that task. So if that task is, reading a novel, would they do better with an audiobook or text to speech, having it read out loud? You could also ask, are you aware of any assistive technology that helps children with difficulties like the one my child has? Have you worked with anyone that uses a communication device, or have you worked with anyone that uses voice typing instead of their fingers? And sometimes they may not know that. So if they're not aware of any AT that might help, who in the district knows about assistive technology? How can we contact that person? And then another question you could possibly ask is, what assistive technology, if any, has been tried with my child? And how did that work? And these are all really good questions, really straightforward and helpful to the point. And then finally, how do I start the process of determining what assistive technology might help my child with this problem? Is there a form I need to fill out? So these are just some examples that Penny Reed and Gail Bowser gave us from the resource guide, Assistive Technology Pointers for Parents. And the good news is I linked this for you, and I will show you at the end of the presentation. Now, I gave you some example questions that you as a parent may consider asking. Now, I mentioned early on that I am a practitioner and I've been in the field of AT for over 20 years. So when I look at assistive technology, this is the practitioner and school role in AT consideration. I wanted to provide you with a parent's role, and now I want to provide you with the practitioner school role. So as a practitioner, these are some of my guiding consideration questions. If the student is currently using AT, is the AT adequate to address the goals and objectives, right? Because as we mentioned early on, that process is secular. It's not linear. It's not going on a roll because the student's changing, their curriculum is changing. So we want to make sure that the AT is always adequate. Also, does the student need AT to access the curriculum? Do they need it to have textbooks read out loud? Do they need a keyboard in order to do their assignments? Does the student need AT to access instructional materials? So maybe the student uses a Chromebook, maybe a touch screen is needed, maybe a screen magnifier is needed. Does the student need AT to access technology used by other students? And sorry, that was my example for that one. If you use a Chromebook, do you need a screen magnifier or a touch screen? The instructional materials would be, do we need to scan in our worksheets? Do we need some way to scan them in and type on them? And then this is a big one. Could AT help the student work more independently? Now, I'm a mom of 2 teenagers, and I know obviously all of you are parents online, and there's probably some practitioners online as well. And how many of you, and you don't have to raise your hand, just silently do this, want to follow your students around? Many times we write in the IEP accommodations for scribing, so writing for them, or having the text read out loud, right? No one wants to follow them around after high school and read for them or write for them. So what we have to do is show our students how the AT can make them more independent. And I always hate when I hear, students are so great at technology. Students are so great at technology. Well, now answer this question in your head. What technology are students good at? They're good at Snapchat. They're good at gaming. They're good at TikTok. Very few students are good at using assistive technology to make them more independent. So we have to take advantage of the wonderful technology that's out there and allow our students to work more independently. And, it's just out of habit. When we read tests to students, we may, subconsciously just kind of stress the answer. A friend of mine that I work with has a daughter with a learning disability, and she always liked to go to Mrs. Johnson's room because Mrs. Johnson always read the test to her in a special way, and she always got an A and always knew the answer because Mrs. Johnson would say, "Are you sure that's your answer? Or why don't you try again?" And I don't think, we're on this field because we want to help, but I don't think that was helping my friend's daughter at all. And I think the use of AT would have made it more independent and a true reflection of her skills, and maybe would have pushed her a little bit more, knowing that she wasn't going to be given the answer. And again, the staff member was probably just thinking they were helping, right? So I know there was no ill will, but we just have to think of the repercussions of having a scribe, of having someone read it to you. So bottom line, I just kind of like to keep it simple sometimes. Will that technology make the student more effective, efficient, so maybe they can complete their work on time? If they're using their voice to type, they're making less errors. If they're using word prediction, they're spelling things correctly. and independent. And I already went over that independent with a story. So keep those three in mind. It may be a little bit easier: effective, efficient, and independent. I mentioned that sometimes you may need an assessment or an evaluation. So that we're very fortunate that the Illinois Assistive Technology Manual, which I have linked for you in a later slide, also gives us a definition of that. So an AT evaluation, and you may be familiar with your child being evaluated, it's the process by which the IEP team collects information, determines a student's need for AT devices and services. Don't forget that services part. And it can be initiated by any team member, including you folks, including parents. And when the IEP teams find an AT evaluation is necessary as a result of AT consideration discussed during an IEP meeting, the team should suspend the consideration AT until the AT eval is complete. And much like any other evaluation with the IEP process, an AT evaluation is a process and it has to adhere to that parental consent. So you have to sign off and the 60-day timeline. Now, AT assessment it's a tool. Many teachers, many therapists use different tools to gather information on a student's performance in relation to an AT service and device. And just like all good teaching practices, this can include an integration of a variety of instructional practice, review of how you deliver it. You may try different instructional practices or change an instructional methodology to improve student outcomes, right? When someone's learning to read, sometimes you try different approaches to help that student learn to read. Assistive technology, same thing. You may try some different things. You kind of evaluate if it's effectiveness. You look at the use with the AT, without the AT, to see if it made a difference. An ongoing assessment of student performance in relation to AT, you review their instructional supports or their need for any specialized instruction using that AT device. Again, many districts are, and again, I would always refer back to the legal practices of your district, as all the districts follow different procedures. But many districts are performing that AT assessment where they're taking the IEP team and really having them perform that to see if a tool doesn't work or not work, especially for something like text to speech. That can be easily integrated. You know, you're determining if having text out loud increases the student's ability to comprehend text. You know, you don't need a very an AT specialist to see if that tool works or doesn't work, or how does voice typing work? Does that improve my student's writing? So there's lots of tools that the teams are already familiar with that they may not need an AT person because they already have that ability. Which leads me to, this is again from the Illinois Assistive Technology Manual, who can conduct or be involved in an AT assessment or evaluation. Again, I'm going to defer, much like if you want an assessment or an evaluation, I refer to the district, and I refer to the district's legal team and how they handle things. I'm just stating facts from the AT manual in terms of the difference between evaluation, assessment, and who can conduct it. And there is no legal guidance regarding the qualifications of people involved in these processes, but the district may have different ideas in that, but I'm just giving the Illinois manual facts. They do not have to be an AT specialist, so it could be that classroom teacher determining if text to speech is working. And the person does have to have an understanding of the following. So think about this. I'm going to answer these questions as an AT person. Do I know the student's current performance, interests, disability impact on the student's disability on performance? And I'm going to say, I find that out from the IEP team, right? Because the IEP team knows this. Do I know the curriculum tasks in which the student is expected to perform? I do not. I find that out from the IEP team. They know all that. And then finally, the scope of potential AT tools and services the student may need to be successful. Now, I do have a strong foundation of AT tools and services. So I may have those answers, but the classroom or the IEP team may have those answers too. So it's helpful to know who can conduct an AT assessment or evaluation. So any questions so far as I go even deeper into AT consideration and how us practitioners kind of look at that? I'm going to look at the chat. Yes, Christina, you do have access to the Illinois AT manual. It's actually linked in this presentation, and I will definitely get to it and show you the link at the end. So Julie asks, are there better text-to-speech applications that use real voices recommendation. Text-to-speech voices are really important, and that is a student preference. I will say the built-in ones are pretty good. Just try those out with your student or your child and play around with the different voices. The built-in accessibility ones for iPads, for your phone, for Chrome are all great. And just play around with the speed and then the change of the voices. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to keep going. But again, type those questions as you think of them. So I laid the basic foundation of AT definitions. Then we talked about what is AT consideration from a parent perspective, from a practitioner. And now I want to dive even deeper as we look at the tools. So how do AT people and IEP teams pick out tools? And there's a number of frameworks out there that you can choose from. The gold standard that's been around for over 20 years is something called the SET framework. And maybe some of you have heard of that. And again, it was developed by one of the pioneers in the field, Joy Zabala. Sadly, she died last year, but has definitely left her print in the assistive technology world as her work continues to guide us. Because it can be so overwhelming. I know I get overwhelmed with the possibilities of technology out there. So what I use, and many AT people use, and many IEP teams use, is the SET framework to help you narrow it down so it doesn't feel overwhelming. Sometimes you may hear this called the SET process, and it's not a process. It's a framework. It's a framework to guide your thinking. It's a framework to guide your questions. And we love our acronyms, as you know, in special ed, and it stands for student, environment, task, and tool. So when I'm looking at assistive technology, the framework is helpful because it helps IEP teams gather information and make collaborative decisions. This is not an assessment or evaluation. This is just a tool to use and that helps with an assessment or helps with an evaluation. It's just a small portion of it. So S is for student. And when I'm looking at the student, I look at what's the functional area of concern. Is it reading, writing, communication? What does the student need to be able to do that's difficult or impossible to do independently? Big phrase there, independently. What's their special needs? What's their strengths, their abilities, their special present levels of performance, the student expectations, and also any formal evaluation would also be helpful. The E is for environment. And you look at conditions inside the environment. So what barriers are there? Does the student sit in the back of the classroom? Does the teacher have a low speaking voice? The student has a hard time hearing it. What supports are there already inside the classroom? Are there technology supports already available? Are there paraprofessionals available? What's the physical arrangement of a classroom? Does the student sit in the front, in the back? I kind of gave that example. What supports there? That could be paraprofessional. It could be IT support. There's some great, maybe universal extensions that all students have access to, and that could include the materials and equipment. Also, I look at any access issues. Does the student have trouble accessing the materials, the technology? And also a really important one, and sometimes an ugly one to talk about, is the attitudes and expectations of the student. Attitudes are a really big part of the success of anything. So we can't say we're technophobes anymore. We have to accept the technology is here to stay. And we also have to have high expectations for our students and expect them to be able to achieve success, and especially with the use of AT. The first T is for task, and that's reading, writing, communication. Those are just a few examples. Now, I gave a generic example of reading, writing, communication, but this is so important when you want to narrow down your tasks. I may say writing, but if you think about writing, we all write for different purposes, right? We write on Post-it notes, we write shopping lists, we write emails. Students write reports, they write on worksheets, and they take notes, right? Those are all very different tasks. So let's say I have a student, and you may struggle in more than one area, but for my example, I'm just going to pick one. Let's say we have a student who struggles with report writing, right? Well, there's lots of tasks even involved in report writing. You have trouble gathering ideas. Maybe it's organization. Maybe it's how they write, their physical handwriting. And maybe their trouble is editing. I'm going to use different technology tools based on all of those different answers, right? So really specifically narrowing down that task is going to be helpful. Because if the task may be editing and they really have a hard time editing, I'm actually going to pick text to speech and like a grammar checker, as opposed to if it was motor, I'm going to pick a keyboard or voice typing. So you'll notice that being really specific is going to be helpful in finding that right tool. You're going to be looking for those features. And I mentioned features because I always think in features first. I think in what does the student need to be successful? Is it text to speech? That's a feature. Keyboarding, that's a feature. Typing with my voice, that's a feature. A voice output communication system, that's a feature. A grammar checker, that's a feature. I'm not getting into name brands of things. So this is actually a very sophisticated tool, but I think that there's very sophisticated parents out there. So I wanted to help with this kind of idea of narrowing down the task and what the student may be having a hard time with. Dan Cochran put this together, and he put it together for reading, writing, and organization and math. And what he did is he gave the specific task demands of each of these tasks. And then you can go through and really reflect about the student's performance in each of those areas, and you can kind of write that down. And then you notice he suggests AT features because there are so many components of reading, of writing, of organization, of math that you need to really pinpoint that down in order to find the right feature of assistive technology to help you. And again, if you look in those assistive technology feature columns on the right, he is not naming one name brand thing. He is just talking about strategies, which are the features. So for example, if you look at the cognitive demands of reading, decoding, and fluency, there may be audiobooks, there may be text to speech, there may be the cognitive demands of vocabulary. Well, that's a lot different too. I'm going to look at dictionaries. I'm going to look at translation tools. Also, the cognitive demands of comprehension could be synthesis. So, and he says right off the bat, there's no AT features. So assistive technology is not appropriate for everything. And I have gone out to see students and have definitely not recommended AT because assistive technology will not help that specific task demand that your child or the student is having trouble with. So this is really helpful in narrowing that AT feature down so you're not overwhelmed with all the things that are out there. And then that can be really helpful. So maybe then I narrow down that I do need text to speech. So then I say, oh, what has text to speech? Oh, all my devices have text to speech. And does it have the features that I need for text to speech? So it's really a helpful tool. That is one tool that you can have. And I'm going to share another one in the next section as well that can help you with that. Sorry, I have this open twice. And that helps you find the final T, which is tool. So that resource I gave you, it helps with the task, and then it also helps with the tool. And then the tool is whatever is needed by the student and others. So that means the child's team for the student to do the task in the environment in order to meet the student's expectation. So you need the tool. So whatever's needed by the student. So that's the tool, but also the service. And that service is by others in order for them to be successful. Beware of T-set. And this goes back to don't put the tool first. Some of you remember when Oprah gave out a car to everyone. She said, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car. This is 20 years old. And I know I probably need to find a more updated analogy, but I still love it. So when iPads first came out, everyone was getting an iPad. You get an iPad, you get an iPad. We were putting the tool first. If we put the tool first, we are looking for failure. It is not going to work. We always need to consider the student, the environment that they're in, the tasks that they're asked to do. Then we're going to look for those features. And then we look at the final thing, which is the tool. So here are some problems that happen when we're looking at tools. We have to make sure we focus on the student environment and tasks. I just said that. We have to make sure that we suggest features that might increase, improve, or maintain functioning, and a continuum of supports with that. So I noticed some things in the chat. So I am going to go ahead and look at those questions. So one question is, when discussing the Illinois AT manual as well as following district guidelines, which holds more weight? If there are processes outlined in the AT manual that differ from the district guidelines, what then? Guidance prevails and should govern what the IEP team does. I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to defer back to the district and your legal team and the administration and how they want to deliver that. I guess the famous answer would be it depends, because I don't know where it differs or how it differs, because it may not be exact and it may be the same at the same time. So I'm going to refer back to admin and your legal team. And if you want to have a discussion about this more specifically, I'd be happy to do that. The next one is AT assessment is not listed on ISB's domains document in the IEP. Teams follow when going through the 3-year reeval. During the domain meeting, the team is reviewing existing data and deciding if what further testing needs to be done. Should AT be considered at the times? She's asking, should AT be one of the domains? Okay, so I'm going to give you the famous answer. Talk to your school team and your lawyer. I'm going to give an answer that's very generic. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not saying what you should do. I'm going to tell you from going up and down the state and meeting regularly with AT folks across the state. I'll tell you what they do. But again, I'm going to refer to your, and actually this question is referenced in the FAQ, but still follow the legal guidance. Most schools do not have AT as a domain because if you think about it, assistive technology supports the domains that already are open. Communication, academics. So those types of domains are already open. AT is just another tool or strategy to help them be successful. And again, I will share with you, I'll link it in the slides. I didn't put it in here, but I linked the Illinois Assistive Technology Manual. And then we also came out with a FAQ, and the FAQ, that was one of the questions. So there is some legal guidance from ISB on that because the FAQ was also approved by the state. So I can give you a little more specific. So where should services be included in the IEP, in just the AT section, or is there another place in the IEP that AT services can be included? It is actually addressed in the AT manual, and you'll notice that services can be kind of, much like AT is documented, that can be embedded throughout the IEP. So I'm going to have you reference the manual, and that will tell you, a lot of times you'll see it in support for school personnel. And then, again, I'm going to refer to your lawyer and your admin team, but also in the additional notes section. And I've said this 8 times and I'll say it again. I'm not a lawyer. I've never heard of someone being dinged for over documentation. I've heard them being dinged for under documentation. So keep that in mind. Can that IEP be implemented if that child were to move? So what kind of services does that kid need? And will that new IEP team be able to implement that based on what you've documented? So under supports for personnel, that it could go there. Under additional notes, it could go there. Those are just 2 examples. Okay, any other questions? Throw them in the chat. Next step after consideration. Okay, so we're thinking about AT, right? We're thinking about it. The team may conduct their own AT assessment or evaluation, or the team may feel like they're unable to make that decision. They may call outside individuals. Then after you decide of you're going to do some AT assessments or evaluation, there will be a trial. You always want to try out that assistive technology in the natural environment to know if it works. For example, when I go out to see a student, I may try the initial time some assistive technology in a little room, just introduce it to think. It's almost like a test drive for a car, right? I'm just trying it out. I want to see if this is even a glimmer of hope, a possibility this may work. If I see that it may work, there's a glimmer of hope, let's try this tool out. But we're going to try it out for an extended period of time in the student's natural environment, performing the typical tasks. That is going to tell me if that is successful or not. We're going to take data. And then we're going to develop an AT plan for who is doing what and when. Also, when are we going to review that trial period to determine if the tool is appropriate? Of course, this is just a summary of what happens. But the bottom line is AT doesn't happen overnight. It's a circular cycle that happens all the time based on the legal definition. And then if it's a go, if we do this trial and it seems to be successful, or the student seems to be improving, then the AT tools necessary, you're going to develop a long-term implementation plan and include that in the IEP. And then you're going to have periodic review and yearly consideration of AT based on that student's progress. So that's what it looks like in a nutshell. Now, everyone always likes the shiny tools, the more tools. I always call this section the tools, tools, and more tools. Again, by the time this training is over, we are going to have 8 new tools that are out there, and they're constantly changing. So I wanted to share with some resources with you to kind of build your capacity and build your empowerment and have them in your back pocket. This first one I came across this school year, and I love this tool. I haven't seen anything like this in a long time. And this kind of also goes back to that domain question. If you notice, AT is not a domain, but here are some academic domains that it can support, right? So this is called AT Select. It's a web-based tool, and I have it hyperlinked. So anything underlined in the presentation is going to take you to that hyperlink. And I already have this open. And AT Select is also based on the SET framework. They do the E and the S in a little bit of different order, and that's okay. Joy Zabala said you don't have to do it exactly. The only thing you have to do, Joy Zabala says, the creator of SET, is to do tools last, and this does tools last. So this website is based on that SET framework. The first thing they're discussing is the environment, and they ask all these great questions pertaining to the environment. Because we don't have time, I'm going to pretend we had this really rich discussion based on the environment, talking about what devices they're using, where are they working, and then other considerations. And then we're going to have a really rich discussion about the student. And we're going to say, where is the student struggling? What are their strengths? What are their challenges? I'm going to pick reading, right? So what areas are we talking about? Are we talking about reading comprehension? Are we talking about vocabulary? Are we talking about decoding, reading fluency, or metacognition? And again, because those tasks are all very different, I'm going to pick different features to support those tasks that the student may be struggling. So we're going to say reading comprehension. So let's pretend we had a rich discussion. And then I'm going to go to next. And then here are the different areas. And I'm going to pick reading. And this is what I love. And this is a nice little graphic. I go over reading and I dwell over it. It is going, so decoding and fluency, it gives me a nice little definition that pops up. Comprehension, it gives me a nice little definition that pops up. So I talked about a student that struggles with decoding and fluency. So I can present text out loud. Well, how do I present text out loud? I can use an audiobook. I can use text to speech. I can use text to speech voices, talks about text to speech voices or a talking pointer. So I'm going to pick text to speech. So now I can learn more about that tool. Here's a nice basic overview of text to speech. The next section talks about special considerations. It talks about having actual characteristic recognition and having accessible. It talks about being able to read a document. It also provides some research, some advantages, some disadvantages, some special things to consider. And these are really important things to consider if you're using text to speech. And then it finally gets down to the tools. There's some paid ones, there's some free ones, and you can all check those out. So I think that's a lovely tool for IEP teams to help build capacity. This is another one. This is an oldie but a goodie. This came out of Georgia's Assistive Technology Consideration Resource Guide, and this is all linked here. So if you want to take a look at some different assistive technology consideration resource guides, so different areas, right? So I'm going to open this up real quick so you can see what this looks like. So the first area, it talks about writing, and this is a 10-page document. Don't worry, I won't go through all 10 pages. But you can see just for writing alone, it does reading, writing, memorization, math, access, communication, tons of areas. But it talks about the areas, the area and sample instructional tasks. So what is that the student has to do? Draw, illustrate, write name, copy, right? So this is helpful in IEP teams to think about what the task is, or to kind of help remember what some of the tasks are. You can use it twofold. So what are the standard classroom materials? Again, this is something you could use, or, oh yeah, we do that. I forgot, we already have access to that. And then what are some possible accommodations and modifications that can be used? Oh yeah, I forgot, we do that. Oh no, that's a good idea. Maybe we should try that. And then finally, what are some assistive technology solutions? Again, these are all features. You're not going to find any name brands here. These are all features for assistive technology. That's helpful in considering AT for tools. Another helpful thing. Oh, and I just made it bigger, but we went through it already. Another helpful guide is you may not know what those words mean, right? And so they also put together a glossary of terms, which is really helpful. So if you download this, it's all hyperlinked and it's all alphabetical. So you may not know what something is. So I may not know what a slant board is. So I'm going to click on S for that. And then it says slant board. A slant board is an angled board that's designed to provide an ideal writing or working surface to students with writing or reading. Oh, I know what those are. So it's a really helpful guide. So if you read something, you don't know what it is, you don't always have to Google it. You can just kind of click the link and have that PDF right there in front of you. So you have access to that. And then I mentioned, and I referenced a few of my slides, the assistive technology pointers for parents. And I've hyperlinked that one. And then I have hyperlinked the Illinois Assistive Technology Manual, which you can download. It's 96 pages and it was updated in 2020. And when I show you this index, it covers all the areas and it also talks about AT in the IEP as well. And I will also, as soon as this presentation is over, I am going to link the FAQs, which again, I'm not going to tell you what you have to do, but I will tell you what the manual says and go back to your admin and your legal team. But they do answer that FAQ about opening a domain for AT. And like I said, I can just tell you from my informal conversations from across the state, most districts don't do it, but you do what works best for your district. The other two resources that are really exciting, one is the Office of Special Education Programs just came out last month with a Dear Colleague letter and AT document. And it's myths and facts surrounding assistive technology devices and services. I love this document because it's written in perfect language for all. You don't have to be an AT person to understand it. It goes over all the different areas and it goes over it in a great, easy to understand way where it provides a myth, providing an AT device to a child with a disability satisfies IDEA's AT requirements. But the fact is, and you folks already know this, IDEA requires the IEP teams to consider whether a child with a disability needs AT devices and services, right? People always think it's a shiny tool. It's that services part. So then this goes into describing the service. Then it just follows that format. Myth, fact, really beneficial, really helpful, and language that can be understood by all, not just AT professionals. So I linked that. I think you're really going to like that one. And then the final resource I gave you is just talking about accessible educational materials. Most of our kids need access to that, so I wanted you to have that information. Now, I mentioned our website a whole bunch. This is our free state website. We have a special section, it's called AT for IL, for parents. And so it goes more in depth about assistive technology. It has an assistive technology overview. It has some parent resources. It also has some FAQ questions. So you can check that out. The Illinois manual is what I hyperlink for you. But if you somehow lose that link, you can always go here and download it. And you can also download the FAQ, but don't worry, I'll hyperlink that for you in the presentation as well. That's why I love electronic presentations. And maybe we can throw that link one more time for this handout in the chat. So it's really easily accessible for that. The other thing I want to highlight on this website is we have a parent section. We also have a section A10. This is also grant funded. It's called the Assistive Technology Exchange Network. All students with an IEP or 504 plan can access for at home or for school a refurbished computer. And the price is based either $35 to $85, depending upon what kind of tool you need. And it's great that the students can also use this tool at home. The district does have to sign off that the student has an IEP, and the new folks will have to mesh out who will pay for that, but it is a great resource. And the other resource I want to share with you is called DME, and that stands for Durable Medical Equipment. And this again is absolutely free. This is available not just for students, but for adults. It's absolutely free, gently used durable medical equipment. People donate gently used equipment, and then anyone in the state of Illinois, actually anyone anywhere, can get this equipment. We're located in Tinley Park. You can pick it up or we'll ship it. If we ship it, you folks have to pay for shipping. But it's a great way to get durable medical equipment in the hands of students and adults. We know that it's very expensive. And please know that you can get it for your child, for your grandma Betty, for your neighbor. I've gotten it from my neighbor, I've gotten it from my mom, and the only stipulation is that you return it when you're done so other people can benefit from it or, give it to someone else. So keep those in mind, and those are also located on the website as well, the AT for IL. Now hop back to the presentation. Okay, I wanted to leave about 5 minutes for questions, and I have about 6 left. So I'm going to go over to the chat. Oh, thanks, Carrie. Carrie's been wonderful moderator. Thanks, Carrie. People are saying thank you.
There is a question in the Q&A box, it looks
Okay.
like.
Oh, sure, I see that too.
Okay.
Oh, Elizabeth asked a good question. Is there a place to get a certification or a credential in AT that would recommend for a parent? So there's no such, there's 2 things to consider. If you want to learn more about assistive technology, the University of Chicago online has a certificate program, and it's a master's degree program. If I would recommend it's maybe talking to someone at the program, because it really is geared toward the practitioner. It's not geared toward the parent. There are some videos on the online classroom for AT for IL, and there are some videos there that can help you dive deeper. But I think just heads up, that certificate program is really geared towards the professional. But certainly you could apply to the program and or talk to someone there, and it may be helpful. So that's one option. And then Christina, I know that you wanted to see the FAQ, so that answers your other question. I know my famous answer, talk to your lawyers, but I can't give legal advice. I can just refer back to the manual. Any other questions from folks out there?
I'm
Well,
not seeing any.
me either. So my contact information is on the top slide. So if you do have questions later time, you're all always welcome to reach out. And thank you all for your time. I know everyone's time is valuable. So here's a question. The University of Illinois, Chicago, UIC. So UIC at the University of Illinois, Chicago has talk about acronyms, has an assistive technology unit in ATU. Well, they have staff that comes out to perform assessments. They also have a classroom modules that are all online. It's 12 credit hours, and you can learn more about assistive technology. And there's like an intro course, and then you take different courses based on your area of interest. Am I interested in augmentative communication? Am I interested in learning more about, assistive technology tools for reading and writing? And then you kind of verge off into those. IATP is, again, a grant-funded program, kind of like us, from the Illinois Assistive Technology Program. They have free assistive technology that school districts, and I don't know, I think some adults as well, can rent. So you can rent equipment for free. I shouldn't say rent. You get it for free for like 6 weeks to try out. And that's from IATP. And they also perform some assessments as well. And Infinitec also has some grant assessments. We do couple that with a training, because we want the school teams to build capacity, and then also to be able to perform their own assessments in the future.
I will say, if you want to learn more about the Illinois Assistive Technology, if it's a program or project, they did an overview for us on their program, and that is archived on our website, on the Family Matters website. So if there are questions about what they do, that was just recently done and should be easily accessed under our recordings.
So we focus mostly on the professional learning, the building capacity of providing AT services. They have a lot of equipment and some assessment. And we have assessment and professional learning. And a very generic answer. And thanks for coming, Christina. I know, recognize your name in other presentations as well. You're a dedicated webinar attender. Okay, well, I don't see any questions. Again, I like questions. I encourage all of you to email me if you have further ones. and reach out at any time. Christina, what school district do you work for? Because I may have some additional resources for you. The best school district, the school district of mom. Well, Christina, it's okay that you're a parent because I'm just wondering if your school district is a member of Infinitec, parents can also access our website. So I wanted to find out if you wanted more information, you could always do that too. And you don't have to share that if you don't want to. Okay, good answer, Christina. All right, well, I wish you all the best, and have a great day and happy spring. Take care,
Thank you
everyone.
all for
Bye.
joining us, and just remember to take that survey after you log out. We appreciate your time, and just keep checking our website for future trainings. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Thanks, Carrie, for everything.
Thank you.